You have built the aims. Now you need to prove it works. And the two mechanisms that provide that proof, internally and externally, are your internal audit program and the certification process. These are not the end of the journey. They are the accountability checkpoints that keep your aims honest, effective, and continuously improving. In this final episode of the series, we cover internal audit design and execution, management review, choosing and working with a certification body, navigating Stage 1 and Stage 2 audits, and the post-certification activities that keep your aims alive. By the end of this episode, you will have a complete picture of the ISO 42001 certification journey, from first internal audit to maintained certification. Let's close this series out. Let me be direct. Organizations that skip or superficially execute their internal audit program consistently fail Stage 2 certification audits. Not sometimes, consistently. The reason is straightforward. Internal audit is the mechanism through which you verify that your aims is implemented as designed and effective as intended before an external auditor does the same job and finds gaps you should have found yourself. Clause 9.2 requires you to conduct internal audits at planned intervals. Those intervals should be sufficient to cover all aims clauses and all significant AI systems within your audit cycle, typically 1 to 2 years. The internal audit program is not an annual checkbox. It is a rolling program of assurance activities that gives you continuous visibility into aims effectiveness. The internal audit function also builds organizational capability. Auditors who understand ISO 42001 requirements deeply, who know what evidence looks like, how to conduct effective interviews, and how to distinguish a conformance from a non-conformity, are a governance asset. Invest in their development. And invest in their independence. Auditors cannot audit their own work. If your aims is implemented by one team and audited by the same team, your internal audit has no independence and your certification body will notice. Your annual audit program starts with the risk-based approach required by Clause 9.2. High-risk AI systems and high-risk AI MS elements are audited more frequently and with greater depth. Lower risk areas can be audited with less frequency. This risk-based prioritization is what distinguishes a mature internal audit program from a mechanical box-checking exercise. The program plan should cover audit scope for each planned audit, the criteria against which conformance will be assessed, the relevant ISO 42001 clauses and Annex A controls, the audit method, the auditor assigned, and the scheduled dates. This plan should be approved by senior management as part of your management review process, which signals that internal audit is a leadership priority, not just a compliance team activity. Auditor competence requirements under Clause 9.2 are real. Your auditors need to understand ISO 42001, not just audit technique in general. They need sufficient knowledge of AI governance to assess whether an AI impact assessment is credible, whether a bias testing result is meaningful, and whether a monitoring system is fit for purpose. Where internal competence is insufficient, consider bringing in external support for your internal audit program, particularly in your first audit cycle. An ISO 42001 audit uses three primary evidence collection methods: document review, interviews, and observation. The combination of all three is what gives internal audit its assurance value, because each method checks the others. Documents tell you what is supposed to happen. Interviews tell you what people think happens. Observation tells you what actually happens. The gaps between those three are where your non-conformities live. Document review for an ISO 42001 audit covers the policy and procedure library, the risk register and treatment plan, the impact assessment reports, the AI system inventory, the change records, the training records, the incident log, and the corrective action tracker. Review for completeness, currency, and consistency. Documents that contradict each other are a finding even if each is individually credible. Interviews are the auditor's most powerful tool. Ask open-ended questions. Not, do you follow the change management procedure, but walk me through the last time you deployed a model update. The response tells you whether the procedure is real governance or documented fiction. Ask the same question of different people in related roles and compare answers. Inconsistency is a finding. An inconsistency that reveals a genuine governance gap is a non-conformity. The audit report is the formal record of the audit, its scope, the evidence reviewed, the findings, and the overall conclusion. Findings are classified as conformances, where the aims is operating as required, observations, where there is room for improvement without a clear requirement breach, and non-conformities, where a requirement is not being met. Non-conformities require corrective action. Your corrective action process, which is both a Clause 10 requirement and an Annex A obligation, requires root cause analysis, a corrective action designed to address the root cause, implementation of that action, and verification that the action is effective. This is not a quick fix process. Root cause analysis takes time. Implementation takes time. And verification takes time, because you need to see evidence that the non-conformity does not recur before you can close it. The auditor's role in follow-up is to verify that corrective actions are genuine and effective, not to accept a claim of completion without evidence. If a non-conformity was that AI impact assessments were not being conducted before deployment, the corrective action verification is not, we have updated the procedure. It is, here are the impact assessments for the 3 AI systems deployed since the corrective action was implemented. Management review is a Clause 9.3 requirement and one of the most important governance rituals in your aims. It brings senior leadership together to review the aims' performance, make decisions about resource allocation and improvement priorities, and produce documented commitments that drive action. The inputs to management review include the results of your internal audit program, the status of your AI objectives, your AI MS KPIs, the incident log summary, the corrective action status, the risk register changes since the last review, and any relevant external context changes, regulatory developments, new AI capabilities adopted, significant supply chain changes. Each of these inputs requires a report prepared in advance. Management review is not an improvised discussion. It is a prepared, structured meeting with a documented agenda. The outputs are equally important. Decisions about aims scope changes, resource allocation commitments, policy updates, improvement project authorizations, and the action log. Every decision from management review needs an owner, a due date, and a follow-up mechanism. Management review minutes are audited by your certification body as evidence that senior leadership is genuinely engaged with AI governance. Minutes that record attendance and agenda but produce no decisions or actions will be treated as a finding. ISO 42001 certification is granted by accredited certification bodies, organizations that have been assessed by their national accreditation body and approved to issue ISO 42001 certificates. IAF accreditation is the international standard. An IAF accredited certificate carries global recognition. When evaluating certification bodies, assess, do they have relevant sector experience in AI governance, information security, or your industry? Have they certified organizations against ISO 42001 specifically, or are they new to this standard? What is their auditor's technical competence in AI? And practically, what is their timeline and fee structure? Pre-assessment is an optional step that I strongly recommend for first-time ISO 42001 certification. A pre-assessment is a non-binding review of your AIMS readiness conducted by the certification body or an independent assessor before the formal certification audit begins. It surfaces gaps you might not have identified internally and gives you an opportunity to address them before they become Stage 2 findings. The cost of a pre-assessment is always less than the cost of a failed Stage 2 audit followed by an additional audit cycle. The certification audit happens in two stages. Stage 1 is a documentation review. The auditor reviews your AIMS documentation to assess whether it has been designed to meet ISO 42001 requirements. This includes your scope statement, AI policy, risk assessment, SOA, objectives, and key procedures. Stage 1 does not verify whether the AIMS is working, only whether it has been designed correctly. Stage 1 produces a list of areas for attention, gaps or ambiguities in documentation that need to be resolved before Stage 2. These are not non-conformities, but they are signals that must be addressed. You typically have 4 to 8 weeks between Stage 1 and Stage 2 to close the gaps identified. Stage 2 is the implementation audit. The auditor assesses whether the AIMS is actually operating as documented. This is where interviews, evidence review, and observation determine whether your governance is real or just paper. Stage 2 is where most certification failures occur, not because organizations have not documented their AIMS, but because they have documented an AIMS that their organization is not actually following. The corrective cycle after a major Stage 2 nonconformity can add months to your certification timeline. The investment in making sure your AIMS is genuinely operational before Stage 2 begins is always worthwhile. Certification granted. What now? This is the question many organizations fail to answer adequately, and the result is an AIMS that gradually atrophies between surveillance audits and fails recertification 3 years later. Surveillance audits, typically annual, are conducted by your certification body to verify continued conformance. They are not full re-audits, but they cover a meaningful portion of your AIMS, different areas each year across the 3-year cycle. Treat surveillance audits with the same seriousness as the original certification audit. Governance teams that relax after certification consistently find that gaps accumulate invisibly until a surveillance audit surfaces them. The governance cadence that keeps your AIMS alive. Monthly operational performance reviews, quarterly management reporting, annual internal audit, annual management review, and integration of improvement actions throughout the year. This rhythm is what transforms ISO 42001 from a certification project into an operating governance system. The difference between a management system that works and a certification that lapses. Recertification happens every 3 years. By the time you reach it, your AIMS should be more mature than when you first certified. Not the same system maintained through minimal effort, but a system that has genuinely improved. The organizations that achieve recertification with confidence are the ones that treated the 3-year cycle as a maturity journey rather than a compliance maintenance exercise. That is what I hope this series has helped you build.